Fortuna Prime didn't have weather, it had moods. Today, the mood was golden radiance, a synthetic atmospheric setting that ensured the sun hit every diamond-encrusted skyscraper at a perfect 30-degree angle. On Fortuna Prime, the rain only fell if you were a poet seeking inspiration, and the wind only blew to dramatically catch the capes of high-stakes gamblers. This was the heart of the L flux, a world where probability was not a mathematical theory, but a physical law that favored the wealthy, the beautiful, and the divine. Then the Vagabond landed. It was an old, heavy-lift hauler, its hull scorched by the friction of 100 different atmospheres, and patched with rusted plates that looked like scars on an old boxer. It hissed a cloud of foul-smelling, oily steam onto the pristine, white marble landing pad of the Aurelian Grand Casino. When the pneumatic ramp groaned open, the golden radiance didn't just flicker, it shivered. For a brief moment, the perfect warm sunlight felt thin, cold, and utterly indifferent. Caspian Rook stepped out, squinting through a pair of cracked industrial goggles. He was the ultimate anomaly in this world of gilded perfection. He wore a heavy, oil-stained duster coat lined with lead mesh, and his boots left thick, greasy prints on the translucent marble. In his hand, he absent-mindedly tossed a heavy iron six-sided die. On a planet like this, the die should have danced in the air and landed on a 6 every single time. Instead, every time Caspian caught it, it felt leaden and dull. Beside him, a small triangular drone floated with a rhythmic, mechanical hum. This was Zero, a specialized entropy calibrator. Unlike the sleek, golden drones of Fortuna, Zero was a matte black prism of jagged edges. Its eye sensor pulsed a steady, rhythmic white, the color of a dead signal. "Master Caspian," Zero buzzed, its voice a flat, synthesized monotone. "L flux saturation is at 98.4%. The probability of a spontaneous fortune event is critical. If you sneeze, there is a 40% chance a bag of uncut emeralds will materialize in your pocket. This environment is offensive to my sensors." Caspian didn't answer. He just kept walking. With every step he took toward the towering crystal arches of the casino, the world around him began to realign. A fountain nearby, which usually sprayed water in the shape of complex blooming lotuses through pure luck, suddenly lost its rhythm. The water splashed back into the basin with a chaotic, messy thud. A high-rolling socialite nearby, a woman whose every step was usually a masterpiece of accidental grace, suddenly tripped over the hem of her gown. There was no lucky recovery. She hit the floor with the ungraceful, heavy sound of a physical body meeting a hard surface. "The static is deepening," Caspian muttered, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "They've spent too long dreaming. Time to wake them up." He reached the main gates, where 2 sentinels of the flow stood guard. They were giants of a forgotten race, their armor made of solid probability, a shimmering, translucent material that shifted colors based on how much luck was in the air. They carried fate cleavers, heavy halberds that were psychically tuned to always find the weakest point in an enemy's defense. "Stop, Voidwalker," the first sentinel boomed, his voice echoing like a choir. "Your presence is an anchor. You are dragging the flow into the dirt. We cannot allow the static to enter the Hall of Infinite Winds." Caspian stopped 5 feet away. He tossed his iron die high into the air. It didn't spin. It didn't shimmer. It fell like a stone, hitting the floor and rolling to a stop on a 1. The sentinels stared at it. A 1 on Fortuna Prime was considered a mathematical miracle, a sign of a cursed soul. Around Caspian, the shimmering armor of the guards began to dull, turning into nothing more than heavy, translucent plastic. The fate cleavers lost their glow, becoming mere sticks of cold metal. "I'm not here to play," Caspian said, pulling a crumpled work order from his pocket. "The probability bank sent me. Your vault of eternal fortune has a leak, and when luck starts leaking out, the only thing left is the truth. And usually the truth is heavy." The doors groaned open before the guards could respond. A figure stepped out of the shimmering interior. It was High Chancellor Vane. Not a man, but a being of shifting, mercurial clouds held together by a suit of pressurized silver. He was the architect of this planet's fortune, and right now his silver suit was covered in tiny, jagged cracks. "Caspian Rook," Vane hissed, his voice like steam escaping a pipe. "You are early, and you are incredibly depressing. Your null field is making my guests remember their childhood traumas. It's bad for business." Caspian tucked the die back into his pocket and looked Vane in the eyes. "Business is about to get a lot worse, Chancellor," Caspian said, stepping into the neon-drenched chaos of the Grand Hall. "I'm here to find the thief. And in a room full of people who win by default, the only one who's guilty is the one who's actually trying." As they moved toward the VIP elevators, a massive slot machine nearby suddenly screeched. Its screen flickered, the jackpot symbols disappearing, replaced by 3 simple black words on a gray background. Error. No data. The static had arrived. The longest winning streak in the history of the galaxy was officially over. The VIP elevator was a pillar of swirling, iridescent mist. Under normal circumstances, a passenger would simply step into the fog, think of their destination, and the luck of the L-flux would rearrange their molecular structure to deposit them exactly where they needed to be. It was instantaneous, painless, and statistically perfect. Caspian Rook stepped toward the mist. The moment his heavy, lead-lined boot touched the edge of the platform, the iridescent swirl turned a sickly, bruised purple. The mist didn't transport him. It condensed into heavy, wet droplets that splattered against the floor like rain on a tombstone. "The transit stream has collapsed," Zero droned, its triangular body spinning rapidly. "Probability of successful teleportation, 0%. Probability of falling through the floor and becoming a permanent architectural feature, 82%. Master Caspian, I suggest we use the emergency stairs. They haven't been used since the preflux era. They are dusty." "Stairs it is," Caspian grunted. He kicked a concealed panel at the base of the mist pillar. With a groan of long-forgotten metal, a heavy iron door slid open, revealing a spiral of stone steps stretching down into the darkness. High Chancellor Vane hovered behind them. His silver suit let out a high-pitched hiss of escaping gas. "Stairs? This is barbaric. This facility is built on the grace of the flow. We are not meant to climb." "Gravity doesn't care what you're meant to do, Chancellor," Caspian said, lighting a fresh, acrid-smelling cigar. "It just wants you at the bottom. Follow me and try not to leak on the masonry." As they descended deeper into the foundations of the casino, the golden radiance of the upper floors was replaced by the cold, damp reality of the static. Here, beneath the layers of Lucky Charms and probability engines, the world was made of reinforced concrete and massive, unyielding gears. They reached the corridor leading to the Vault of Eternal Fortune. It was guarded by the Gilded Guard, elite soldiers whose armor was enchanted to spontaneously generate shields exactly where a bullet was about to hit. They didn't need to aim. Their rifles were luck-tuned to always find a vital organ. "Halt!" the lead guard cried, raising his rifle. The weapon shimmered with golden energy. "The Chancellor is under duress. Voidwalker, surrender, or face the wrath of the inevitable." The guard pulled the trigger. Under the L-flux, the energy bolt should have ricocheted off the walls in a miraculous sequence of events to strike Caspian between the eyes. Instead, the gun jammed. The firing pin, no longer guided by luck, struck a fraction of a millimeter off-center. The weapon hissed, coughed a cloud of black smoke, and cracked in the guard's hands. "Impossible!" the guard gasped, staring at the useless hunk of metal. "My weapon is blessed. It has a 100% reliability rating. Statistics are a lie told by people who've never had a bad day," Caspian said. He didn't draw a gun. He pulled out a heavy, double-headed pneumatic sledgehammer from a holster on his back. He flipped a switch. The tool roared to life with a bone-shaking thud-thud-thud. "Zero. Calculate the structural integrity of those breastplates," Caspian commanded. "Calculation's redundant, Master," Zero replied. "In the null field, their armor is just gold-plated tin. One strike will result in total structural failure and a very disappointed soldier." Caspian lunged. He didn't move like a fate walker. There was no grace, no destiny. He moved with the brutal, efficient momentum of a falling wrecking ball. The first guard tried to dodge, but in the static, his feet slipped on the smooth floor. The hammer connected with his chest with a sound like a car crash. The golden armor shattered into 1,000 dull fragments, and the guard was sent flying back into the vault doors. The other guards panicked. They threw probability grenades, devices meant to trigger a landslide of unlucky events for the target. One grenade landed at Caspian's feet. It didn't explode into a swarm of bees or a localized black hole. It simply sat there, rolled twice, and leaked a small puddle of gray, inert fluid. "The party's over, boys," Caspian growled, swinging the hammer in a wide, punishing arc. "Welcome to the real world." 5 minutes later, the corridor was silent. save for the heavy breathing of the Chancellor and the rhythmic ticking of Caspian's cooling hammer. The Gilded Guard lay in heaps, their miraculous armor broken and useless. Caspian stood before the vault. The massive doors were made of Chronos glass, a material that only opened if the person standing before it was destined to enter. "You cannot open it," Vane hissed, his silver suit now dented and dull. "Only the chosen one, the one whose luck is absolute, can bypass the Chronos lock. You are the Null, Rook. You are the opposite of destiny." Caspian looked at the door. He didn't look for a keyhole. He didn't pray for a miracle. He reached into his duster and pulled out a small, palm-sized device, a thermal stress inducer. "I'm not the chosen one, Chancellor," Caspian said, attaching the device to the center of the glass. "I'm the guy who brings the bill." He pressed a button. The device began to hum. The glass, which was supposed to react to fate, suddenly had to deal with a much more pressing issue: expansion and contraction. The temperature of the glass spiked to 3,000 degrees and then dropped to absolute zero in the span of 3 seconds. The Chronos glass didn't recognize Caspian's destiny. It just recognized that it was under too much pressure to exist. With a sound like 1,000 windows shattering at once, the vault door exploded inward. Caspian stepped into the chamber. In the center of the room, on a pedestal of floating light, sat the heart of chance. Or rather, where it should have been. The pedestal was empty. A single, jagged piece of dark, static stone sat in its place, pulsing with a low, gray rhythm. "It wasn't stolen," Caspian whispered, looking at the stone. "It was grounded." "Grounded?" Vane asked, his voice trembling. "What does that mean?" "It means," Caspian said, picking up the dark stone, "someone didn't just take your luck. They've figured out how to turn the L-flux into a weapon. And right now, the entire planet is a ticking time bomb of bad news." Outside, the casino groaned. The golden radiance above them didn't just flicker. It died. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the screams of people who had forgotten how to lose echoed through the halls of Fortuna Prime. The vault's ceiling groaned. Real dust fell, choking, gray, and indifferent. "The flow is dead," Caspian said, pocketing the pulsing gray stone. "Now comes the bill. The ceiling, it's falling." Chancellor Vane shrieked, his silver suit leaking mist. "Where is the protective field?" "It needed luck to stay up," Caspian growled. "0. Exit. Pathfinding. 0 pulsed. Main exit blocked by architectural ironies. I suggest the service tunnels. Probability of being crushed, 30%. Better than 100%. They sprinted. Behind them, the gilded nebula folded like a house of cards. No miracles saved the gamblers. No lucky escapes. Just gravity and concrete. They burst into the plaza. The golden radiance was a memory. The sky was leaden, raining heavy. Oily droplets that hit the marble like bullets. "Company," Zero buzzed, its sensor turning blood red. Figures emerged from the smog. Not guards, but Null Reapers. They wore rags of shadow and carried sickles made of rusted, untuned steel. They didn't glow. They absorbed the light. "The anchor," their leader hissed, his voice a dry rasp of static. "Return the stone, or drown in the zero sum." Caspian revved his pneumatic hammer. The thud, thud, thud echoed in the gray silence. "I've spent my whole life in the static," Caspian said, spitting out his cigar. "You're just visiting." He lunged. No destiny, no fate. Just a heavy man with a heavy hammer, bringing the hammer down on a world that forgot how to bleed. The first Reaper lunged. It didn't move with grace, it moved with the stuttering, glitchy motion of a corrupted video file. Its sickle whistled through the air, aimed at Caspian's throat. Caspian didn't dodge. He leaned into the strike, letting the blade scrape harmlessly against his lead-lined duster. He swung the pneumatic hammer in a short, brutal upward arc. Crunch. The Reaper's head didn't bleed. It shattered into gray, inert sand. Its body collapsed, turning into a pile of ash that the oily rain immediately washed away. "Master Caspian!" Zero shouted, its red sensor spinning. "More signatures. They are inverse flux entities. They don't just ignore luck, they eat it. They are the bank's debt collectors. They've come to repossess the planet's soul. Let them try," Caspian grunted. He slammed a fresh canister of compressed air into the hammer. Click, sure. The Reapers circled, their ragged cloaks flapping in the heavy wind. Chancellor Vane cowered behind a pile of rubble, his silver suit now almost entirely black with soot. They were supposed to be a myth. The bank promised we were protected. The bank only protects assets that are profitable, Caspian said, eyeing the leader. Right now, Fortuna Prime is a liability. The leader raised its sickle. The stone, Voidwalker. Return the anchor or become part of the silence. Caspian pulled the gray pulsing stone from his pocket. He didn't hand it over. He slammed it into the auxiliary port of his hammer. The tool didn't just roar, it screamed. A wave of pure gray static erupted from the hammer, a visible ripple in the air that turned the falling rain into frozen pellets of lead. The Null Reapers froze, their shadow forms flickering as the concentrated Null energy stripped away their cohesion. "Zero, overload the field," Caspian commanded. "Directive accepted," the drone buzzed. It docked onto Caspian's shoulder, its core glowing white-hot. "Initiating the entropy pulse. Say goodbye to the scenery." The world turned gray. The marble plaza cracked. The golden skyscrapers in the distance groaned as their lucky structural integrity vanished. The Null Reapers didn't just die, they were erased, turned into static noise that vanished into the storm. When the light returned, the plaza was empty. The Reapers were gone. But in their place stood a massive, hovering black monolith. A probability bank recovery vessel. "The taxman is here," Caspian muttered, wiping blood and oil from his goggles. "And he's brought a very large bill." The monolith didn't land. It hung a few meters above the cracked marble, a slab of obsidian black geometry that defied the eyes. It didn't have thrusters, it moved by the certainty of its own coordinates. "Warning, Master!" Zero's chassis rattled. "The bank is initiating a systemic audit. They are forcing a 100% probability wave. They're going to fix the reality of this plaza by erasing us from the equation." A beam of golden, blinding light erupted from the base of the monolith. Where it touched the gray, oily rain, the water turned back into sparkling champagne. The cracks in the floor began to heal spontaneously. The universe was trying to luck Caspian out of existence. "Not on my watch," Caspian growled. He slammed the handle of his hammer into the ground. The static stone in the auxiliary port turned a violent, glowing violet. The tool's internal pistons began to cycle at a speed that blurred the metal. This was the entropy engine, a device that didn't just negate luck, it accelerated the decay of everything around it. "Zero, dump the heat," Caspian yelled. "Venting thermal waste into the local timeline," the drone shrieked. A black sphere of distortion expanded from the hammer. When the bank's golden light hit the black sphere, it didn't heal. It rotted. The perfect light turned into a sickly brown smog. The monolith's obsidian hull began to rust and peel in real time, its certainty meeting the impossible decay of the engine. "You can't bill a dead man," Caspian shouted over the roar of the grinding gears. "And you can't audit the void." The monolith groaned, a sound of 1,000,000,000,000 calculations failing at once. The house wasn't just losing, the house was falling down. The engine was pushing back, turning the bank's own power into a graveyard of failed probabilities. The collision between the bank's certainty and Caspian's entropy created a localized fracture in the fabric of space-time. The air didn't just vibrate, it curdled. To anyone watching from afar, the plaza looked like a corrupted file. A jagged, flickering hole where the laws of the universe were being rewritten by two opposing gods. The monolith let out a sound that wasn't a roar, but the synchronized chime of 1,000,000,000,000 golden coins hitting a floor of cold marble. It was the sound of 1,000,000,000 debts being called in at once. From the hull of the black slab, a figure began to extrude. It wasn't a person, but a humanoid shape composed entirely of shifting, golden wire and holographic ledgers. "Taxon 7, Zero buzzed, its triangular body spinning so fast it began to glow white with friction. "An executive liquidator. Its existence is anchored by the bank's total wealth. It doesn't fight with weapons, Master Caspian. It fights with value. It is trying to purchase the air in your lungs. It is putting a price on the electrical signals in your nervous system." Taxon 7 stepped onto the cracked marble. Everywhere its feet touched, the stone turned into pure gleaming platinum. The oily rain turned into a mist of atomized diamonds. "Caspian Rook," the liquidator spoke, its voice a layering of 1,000 different currencies and contracts. "Your account is in deep arrears. You have introduced static into a high-yield environment. You have devalued the destiny of an entire star system. The cost of your existence has exceeded its projected utility. It is time to close the ledger." Caspian felt the pressure. His chest tightened. His heart began to skip beats, not because of fear, but because the liquidator was literally adjusting the market price of his heartbeat. His blood felt heavy, like liquid lead. I never was a fan of the free market, Caspian spat, his voice a ragged whisper. He gripped the handle of his pneumatic hammer until his knuckles turned white. The entropy engine, the gray stone embedded in the tool, was pulsing with a violent, dying light. Zero, reverse the polarity of the null field. If he wants to buy me, make sure I'm a toxic asset. Initiating the bankruptcy protocol, Zero shrieked. The drone dived into the engine's core. Suddenly, the black sphere of distortion around Caspian didn't just push back, it began to absorb. Every diamond that fell from the sky, every platinum tile that Taxon 7 created, was instantly stripped of its value. The diamonds turned back into dirty soot. The platinum turned into rusted pig iron. Caspian lunged forward. In the static, he was the only thing that moved with purpose. He swung the hammer at Taxon 7's golden chest. The liquidator didn't dodge. It couldn't. Its luck was being drained into the engine. The hammer connected with a sound like a wrecking ball hitting a grandfather clock. Golden wires snapped. Holographic numbers bled out into the gray air. You don't get it, do you? Caspian growled, slamming the hammer down again. On Fortuna Prime, everyone wins because the house cheats. But out in the static, out where I come from, you have to earn every damn second of your life. You can't buy gravity, you can't bribe a vacuum. Taxon 7 flickered. Its golden wire frame began to fray, turning into dull copper and then into rusted wire. The monolith above groaned as the static climbed its hull like a viral infection. The heart of chance is gone, the liquidator hissed, its voice losing its melodic layer. Without the anchor, the planet will revert. The weight will be too much. Good, Caspian said, raising his hammer for the final blow. It's time these people learned how to walk on their own 2 feet. He triggered the engine's maximum output. A wave of pure, unadulterated reality slammed into the liquidator. The golden entity didn't just break, it became common. It turned into a heap of scrap metal and outdated paper contracts washed away by the now freezing rain. High Chancellor Vane let out a pathetic whimper as his silver suit finally gave way, collapsing into a heap of dull gray fabric. He was no longer a being of mist. He was a small, shivering creature of flesh and bone, terrified of the cold. The monolith is retreating, Zero reported, its sensor dimming. But the planet's L flux is at 0. Master Caspian, look up. The golden radiance was gone. The fake sky had peeled away, revealing the true face of the universe. Cold, black, and filled with distant, indifferent stars. For the first time in millennia, the people of Fortuna Prime saw the dark, and they realized that the dark didn't care about their luck at all. Caspian leaned on his hammer, his breath coming in heavy, ragged gasps. He looked at the gray stone in his tool. It was cracked, its light fading. The audit isn't over, Zero, Caspian whispered. The bank will be back, and they're going to want their planet back. Then we better find a way to make it too heavy to lift, the drone replied. The silence that followed the destruction of the liquidator was heavier than the scream of the battle. It was the silence of a vacuum, a predatory, hungry thing that began to swallow the artificial music of the casino. High Chancellor Vane lay in a heap of damp, gray fabric, his once shimmering form now nothing more than a shivering, pale humanoid with translucent skin, and eyes wide with the terror of a creature that had just discovered it was mortal. Caspian Rook didn't look at him. He leaned heavily on the handle of his pneumatic hammer, watching the static stone in the auxiliary port. It was no longer pulsing with energy. It was vibrating with a low-frequency hum that he could feel in his teeth. It was the sound of reality asserting itself. Master Caspian, Zero buzzed, its triangular body hovering lower than usual. Its matte black chassis was scorched, and its eye sensor pulsed a tired, dim white. The monolith hasn't retreated. It has moved to an orbital foreclosure position. They are preparing to initiate a systemic erasure. If they can't own the luck here, they will simply delete the planet's coordinates from the galactic ledger. To the rest of the universe, Fortuna Prime will effectively never have existed. Caspian spat a glob of dark phlegm onto the floor. The platinum tiles were already turning back into common, rusted iron. The bank always hits the delete key when they lose a cent. How long until the wave hits? 3 minutes until total erasure threshold, Zero replied. Unless we provide the sector with a new physical constant. We need to ground the planet's probability. Caspian looked down at the stone. The anchor. We drop it into the core. Exactly, Zero said. If you drop that stone into the planet's deep core seismographic well, the null field won't just cover this plaza. It will wrap around the entire planet. It will turn Fortuna Prime into a dead zone for the bank. They won't be able to delete it because it will be too heavy to ignore. But the L flux will be gone forever. These people, they'll have to deal with disease, aging, gravity, and the fact that sometimes hard work leads to nothing. You'll be turning them into humans. Caspian started walking toward the massive ventilation shaft at the center of the plaza. They weren't living, Zero. They were just being kept as pets by a bunch of accountants in black monoliths. Life isn't supposed to be a winning streak. It's supposed to be a fight. He reached the edge of the shaft, but the air suddenly crystallized. A final failsafe manifested. The Grand Auditor. It wasn't a physical entity, but a shimmering wall of complex golden equations that filled the air. It was a logic lock. It didn't fight with weapons. It asserted a mathematical truth. The probability of Caspian Rook taking another step was exactly 0. The closer Caspian stepped, the more the universe pushed back. It felt like walking into a wall of solid ice that existed inside his own mind. The golden symbols burned his retinas, whispering that his existence was a rounding error, a mistake that needed to be corrected. Master, it's a law of the bank's universe. Zero shrieked, its sensors blinding. You can't fight it with the hammer. It's not physical. Caspian stopped. He felt the weight of the universe pressing against his chest, telling him that his next step didn't exist in the equation. He looked at the Grand Auditor, then at the heavy iron die in his pocket. He didn't try to push through with muscle. Instead, he stood perfectly still and closed his eyes. You know what the problem with your math is? Caspian asked the glowing symbols. You think 0 is the end of the line, the end of the... But for a human, 0 is where we start. We're the species that built civilizations in the dirt while the stars ignored us. He didn't move forward into the auditor's space. He moved inward. He focused on the rhythm of his own heart, the weight of his boots, and the smell of the acrid smoke from his cigar. He embraced the static, the absolute, unyielding reality of his own flawed, heavy existence. The golden equations began to flicker. The certainties of the bank began to stutter. Probability only works if there's a choice, a chance, a maybe, Caspian growled, his voice a ragged rasp. But there's no maybe in me. I'm a fact. And a fact doesn't give a damn about your percentages. He punched through the wall of logic. His fist, wrapped in the cold gray light of the null field, shattered the symbols like glass. The golden light didn't just fade, it evaporated, replaced by the smell of ozone and old iron. Caspian stood over the shaft. He looked at the static stone. It was no longer glowing. It was the color of wet soil and mountain rock. Time to ground the circuit, Caspian whispered. He dropped the stone into the dark. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the sound of the wind. Then, a pulse of invisible energy erupted from the depths of the world. It wasn't a wave of light, it was a wave of solidarity. The golden monolith in orbit suddenly tilted, its gravitational anchors snapping. It was no longer a god machine, it was just a very heavy piece of black rock, falling toward a planet that now had its own gravity. The fake sky of Fortuna Prime didn't just peel, it died. The real stars, the cold, distant, indifferent stars, filled the heavens. On the ground, the champagne in the fountains turned to clear, tasteless water. The platinum tiles turned back into humble gray stone. Caspian leaned against the railing, watching the first sunrise of the new era. It wasn't a golden radiance. It was a pale, weak yellow, struggling through the smog of a dying casino. 0, Caspian said, his voice exhausted but steady. How are the numbers? 0's sensor pulsed a soft, warm white. Luck density is 0%, Master Caspian. Probability of tomorrow being exactly what we make of it. 100%. Caspian closed his eyes. Sounds like a fair fight. In the distance, for the first time in 10,000 years, a man tripped on a stone, fell and stood back up on his own. He looked at his scraped knee, saw the red blood, and for the first time, he knew he was real. The black smoke from the crashed monolith rose like a funeral shroud against the pale morning sky. Fortuna Prime was no longer a jewel. It was a construction site. The solid light towers had collapsed into piles of mundane glass and rebar. The shimmering avenues were now just cracked asphalt. The magic was dead, and in its place, the heavy, honest scent of ozone and wet earth filled the air. Caspian Rook stood by the boarding ramp of the Vagabond. His duster was shredded, and his face was smeared with the black soot of a broken empire. He looked at the heavy iron die in his palm. It didn't pulse, it didn't glow. It was just a cold piece of metal. High Chancellor Vane approached him, stumbling over the uneven ground. His silver suit was gone, replaced by a simple wool-spun tunic he had scavenged from a nearby theater. He looked older. His skin was pale, and he moved with a slight limp. "You've ruined us," Vane whispered, his voice cracking with a very human frailty. "The bank has withdrawn. Our wealth is nothing but lead. My people? They don't know how to survive a cold winter. They don't know how to heal a wound without a miracle." Caspian looked at him, then at the thousands of people in the distance, huddled together for warmth. "They'll learn. Humans have been doing it for a long time. You don't need luck to build a fire, Vane. You just need a match and the will to strike it." "And your payment?" Vane asked, looking at the rusted hull of Caspian's ship. "We have no more gold to give you. The value is gone." Caspian reached out and took a small mechanical compass from Vane's belt, a family heirloom that had been a lucky charm for centuries. In the static, the needle finally pointed north. "I'll take this," Caspian said, tucking it into his pocket. "A compass that actually works is worth more than a planet full of fake gold." "Master Caspian!" Zero buzzed, its sensor pulsing a calm, steady green. "The Vagabond's engines are primed? The bank's secondary fleets are repositioning near the galactic core. They are calling this sector a toxic asset. We are officially invisible to their sensors." Caspian nodded. He stepped onto the ramp and looked back one last time. He saw a young girl standing near a fountain, holding a bucket. She was waiting for the water to flow. It didn't spray in the shape of a lotus. It just trickled out, clear and cold. She tasted it, smiled, and started to carry it home. It was heavy, and it was hard, but she was doing it herself. "The galaxy is a big place, Zero," Caspian said as the hatch groaned shut. "Lots of people living in glass houses. Lots of people waiting for a lucky break. Probability of us finding another job before the fuel runs out?" Zero asked. Caspian tossed the iron die. It hit the metal floor of the cockpit with a sharp, clear ring. It rolled, skipped, and landed on a 4. Not a miracle. Just a result. "I don't care about the odds, Zero," Caspian said, gripping the flight controls. "Just give me the coordinates. We'll handle the rest." The Vagabond roared to life, its dirty plasma thrusters cutting through the gray sky. It climbed past the clouds, past the falling debris of the monolith, and into the black, indifferent stars. Caspian Rook was gone, leaving behind a world where for the first time in history the morning was exactly what the people made of it. The winning streak was over. The real work had begun.